Welcome to another episode of The Art of Volunteering. I'm your host, Stormy Bell. Today, my friend Michal Smith, Executive Director of Cradles to Crayons, a regional nonprofit focusing on meeting the clothing needs of children in the greater Philadelphia area, is my guest. Welcome, Michal.
Thank you, and I'm honored to be here.
I'm just going to share a little bit about Michal's background. She came to Cradles to Crayons from the educational enrichment environment where she saw children attending the program with clothing that was inadequate or inappropriate and led kids to being self conscious and unable to perform at their best. Since joining Cradles to Crayons in 2010, the organization has grown from supplying 15,000 children annually with basic essentials, clothing, shoes, warm coats, and school supplies to over 300,000 children in the greater Philadelphia region. And I think that's awesome. So let's just dive in. Can you share a little bit more about Cradles to Crayons? Like, who exactly do you serve? What's your organization? Like, just give our listeners an idea of what you're all about.
I don't think people realize that in the country there are 20 million kids living in poverty. And when a kid is living in poverty, it's tough for the family to afford the basics. They may be food insecure, which we all think about. They may be housing insecure, which again, we're a little bit more familiar with. But nobody thinks about the fact that they're going to be clothing insecure. They haven't got the appropriate, adequate access to an affordable clothing that they need. So Cradles to Crayons has a sort of unique model. We collect gently used clothing largely for kids aged 0 to 12 living in the greater Philadelphia region. We also cover Chicago, San Francisco, New York, and Boston. So we're all over the place, providing clothing, shoes, books, school supplies, hygiene items, warm coats in the winter, hats and gloves, and of course, socks, underwear, and PJs. So we provide those basics for which there's no federal, no state funding. And we pack them up in our giving factory. We call it our giving factory. It's a warehouse where we collect these items from volunteers all over the region who put stuff in containers that we put out all over the region. And we bring back to our giving factory warehouse where, again, volunteers, about 200 volunteers a day. We have 2 shifts every day, about 9 shifts a week, where they pack and sort and check those items to make sure they're of the highest quality. We call it quality equals dignity for our kids. And so each kid can get an outfit pack, which is a week's worth of clothing, get a pair of shoes or sneakers, warm winter coat at this time of year, hat and gloves, and also, most importantly, things like hygiene items. We make sure socks, underwear, and PJs are new. So we need funding for those items that we don't receive in the donated product stream. But the volunteers are absolutely key to what we do.
Oh, that's amazing. So let me ask you, how do you manage 17,000 volunteers?
It's a really good question because we want to make sure that a volunteer who takes the time out of their busy schedule to come and volunteer with us really feels as though they're doing something meaningful. So we have a very small but mighty team of 17 people who make sure that when the volunteers come in, they're greeted. They have a quick orientation. We want them to be put to work. So they spend about 2 hours with us. They could be sorting books. They could be checking sneakers and cleaning sneakers. They could be sorting clothing. But all the time they have what we call a group volunteer leader who works with them side by side to make sure that the experience is meaningful. And the great thing about Cradles is that we can accept volunteers as young as 5 years old. So we have lots of kids. And in fact, right now, today, we're expecting about 100 kids this morning in 4th grade who are going to be working with us, checking books, checking socks, underwear, and PJs so that kids get exactly what they need. We also have a cohort of volunteers we call our champion volunteers because we love our kids volunteering, but sometimes the quality control can be a little challenging for some of the younger ones. And so we have champion volunteers, and this is a cohort of about 50 people who come in every single week to just maintain the quality of the product. They know exactly what our standards are and can sort of just make sure that while those episodic volunteers whose work is absolutely priceless for us um, do the work, that we double check it as well. Every piece of clothing gets checked about 4 times.
Amazing. Simply amazing. Um, okay. You have school groups, but what motivates people volunteers to come to you? Like, how do they maybe hear about you? What makes their passion rise up that they want to spend an hour to 2 hours every week or once a month?
I think that's a really good question, because obviously there's a component of that where corporations do this as part of their CSR activities. So somebody is assigned to a volunteer visit as part of their corporate engagement. And schools, kids need service. So there is some of it that is sort of mandated, but that I would say is a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of it. What I think is so amazing that people come into our warehouse and they may not know very much about us. And but by the end of really our orientation, they know that every single thing that they touch while they're in the warehouse is going to be in the hands of a kid who hasn't got what they need to be successful. So everything they touch in a matter of days will be out with a kid making a difference. And I think it's the fact that the work is meaningful. We absolutely have to have volunteers here sorting the product. Unfortunately, some things that get donated aren't really in a state that we really want to see our kids wearing. And so the volunteers are key in ensuring that we maintain quality and that kids get everything that they need. They need 5 pairs of socks and 5 pairs of underwear, 1 pair of PJs, um, 2 or 3 outfits. And the outfit piece is so much fun because people get really engaged in that, making sure that the clothing mixes and matches. People get so excited when they've got a really great outfit, or they can add an accessory that happens to have come in. So it really is wonderful seeing the excitement in our volunteers. And I think the connection is key, because sometimes with your volunteering, you don't necessarily see the impact. But our volunteers, by the end of the shift, there's a pile of outfit packs ready to go out to kids, or there are packs of books, 5 or 6 books, which are age and gender appropriate, that are going out to a kid. And I think I call that tangible philanthropy. And the fact that our volunteerism is tangible, I think, is really what makes a difference for our volunteers. And it's just fun to see the light bulbs go off in kids when they suddenly realize a kid just doesn't have what they have and they can help.
Oh, that's amazing. All right. So, as young as 5, um, any age? We're talking 80s, 90s?
Any age, absolutely. One of the nice things about what we do is that while there's work going on in our Giving Factory warehouse, there are also ways people can engage in their own homes. We
Okay.
have Giving Factory at work for our corporate partners, but we also have Giving Factory at home. So people can make well wish cards. Every backpack that we send out about 75,000 backpacks. Every backpack has a card wishing the child to do well in school. So on a rainy day, it's absolutely great. A family can get together and make 20 or so cards and be engaged. We have retirees in homes or living centers around here who knit. And there's nothing better than being able to give a baby a knitted cap or knitted booties that have been knitted with love by someone in a retirement home. So I think that the oldest recorded volunteer I know about is, I think, in 86 or 87. It was one of our champion volunteers' grandmas, and she got her entire retirement home knitting for her, so that it was really great.
Oh, amazing. I love that. All right. Let me ask you this. You talked about the impact that the volunteers see that day. Like at the end of the day, there's all these wardrobe kits ready to go out. Have you seen impact once they're sent out? Like what that looked like or any stories of impact?
The impact of our clothing is amazing. There are crisis situations. I remember a snowy day when two kids not far from here turned up at a McDonald's and it was snowing. It was a Friday evening. I can remember it so clearly. And somebody called me and said, I've got two kids here. They're wearing very thin t-shirts and thin pants, and they don't actually have shoes. And they're at McDonald's and they're hungry. And we immediately mobilized and got two clothing packs for the kids, winter coats, shoes. We found out their sizes and everything. The kids ended up with their grandmother. It turned out that their father had died. The mother was unfortunately incarcerated, and their sister had been looking after them. And she was young and she just didn't have the capacity to do it.
Mm.
So by the end of the evening, the kids were with their grandmother, which was wonderful, with warm clothing, shoes, and the 5-year-old, it was a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. The 5-year-old received a pack of books with, I think it was Frozen. And Frozen was her favorite thing. And she got this pink book with Frozen, with a Frozen theme. And she just apparently didn't let go of it all weekend. She was just so thrilled. So I think we think about those emergency situations, and that's where our work really has an impact. But there's also the impact of kids um, just not going to school. They're not going to school because they haven't got a warm winter coat. Or we have a mom who has run out of diapers and she can't leave her baby in daycare so she can get to work and further her career because she hasn't got diapers. And I think it's the fact that without the items that we provide, families can't realize their full potential. And as I go back to that 20 million number, um, there are a lot of families, unfortunately, in that situation. 40% of families can't afford their weekly expenses. And so, if we can step in and provide the clothing, the diapers, things that otherwise would be very expensive, we can make a difference in so many kids' lives and relieve the pressure for moms, dads, and caregivers.
I think it was in your bio about how students would come to learning spaces and not have appropriate or just what they need and how that impacts the learning. And so it becomes a whole cycle if they don't have what they need to wear, then they're self-conscious and they're paying attention to themselves and not to the teacher. It just the cycle just keeps going.
It absolutely does. And I think one of the saddest things is unfortunately kids sometimes aren't nice to each other. And
No.
if you haven't got the right clothing, you don't sort of fit in, you can be bullied. And I think that again is another factor that people don't realize that clothing is a path to fitting in, which is so important for kids.
Right. 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 Do you have a volunteer journey?
I think my volunteer journey was to get to Cradles to Crayons. I actually had to apply to this job twice to get to
Oh.
work here. And my when I saw this model, donated clothing collected from the community where otherwise it would end up in landfills, that again then gets turned around with volunteer support to usable great outfit packs to benefit kids. And the fact we can do it at scale. When I started, we were helping about 15,000 kids annually. And now we're helping 300,000 kids in the region. And with our Giving Factory Direct, which is an extension of our Giving Factories, where you can use an app and connect with a child anywhere in America, it's really amazing. Well, in fact, probably could be anywhere in the world. So the fact that this entire model is embedded in volunteerism There is not one piece of what we do that we could do without volunteers, whether they're in the community, whether they're in our giving factory, whether they're in their home doing work, whether they're corporation coming in. And so anything I can do to support a volunteer doing more is, I think, just such an exciting reason to get up every day.
That's awesome. All right. My next question my listeners love. I've actually had this last week. Someone mentioned to me and they asked me what my blooper was. So I'm going to ask you, can you share a blooper? It doesn't mean something went wrong. It just means it didn't go quite as planned. And what did you learn from it?
Oh gosh, this is one that it was some years back, and somebody asked us if we could take a tractor trailer load of diapers, and that's a big 40-foot tractor trailer. You've seen them on the roads, and I didn't know if we could. We did have a dock that could accept something like that, but we didn't actually have a parking lot where they could turn around, which I realized was a secondary problem. But the thought of all those diapers that we could get to kids, I just said yes. And then I realized, oh my goodness, we can't take them off by hand. We've got to find a forklift truck. Um, and anyway, so I ran up and down our complex where our factory was then located. And I finally managed to find, with the help of a colleague, a forklift truck. And we got the forklift truck. And then they said, well, you can't drive it unless you have a license. So we ran around the complex again to try and find someone who had a license. And someone who worked in an office nearby just said, I said, we've got a forklift truck. We have to unload these diapers. It's a wonderful donation. Do you have a license? And this guy said, oh, yes, I've got a license. And so we offloaded the diapers. It took us a while because taking that many diapers off is a lot of work. So 625,000 diapers later, I said to this guy, I said, how come you've got a forklift truck license? You're an office manager. And he said, I said I had a license. I didn't say I had a forklift truck license. I've got a scuba license. But I think the funny thing about that is we all said yes. Everybody chipped in, everybody volunteered. And then I think it was 7 hours later when we put the diapers out, our partners had taken them all back to their human services agencies. All of that 625,000 diapers went into the community in a matter of 7 hours. And we couldn't have done it without volunteers. It's just amazing. But it could have been a very, very different story, frankly.
Yes, it was. And I guess you have to be specific forklift drivers.
Well, I think it counted in our favor that we weren't specific, but
That's true. Okay, Michael, we're at the point in our conversation where I'm just going to give you the floor. I would like to invite you to love, like all capital lovers, just love on Cradles to Crayons. Is there something that we you want to share that we haven't covered, or why should people get involved? Just love on your organization.
well, thank you, Stormy, for that opportunity. I think it's difficult for me to explain to people how much impact a volunteer can have in only one action to help a kid. So it might be in the community where you collect some clothing. You perhaps decide you're going to buy a pair of socks or some underwear for a kid. But the great thing about our model is that absolutely anybody can help, anybody at all. So it might be some purchased clothing. It might be some clothing your kids have worn out of. Actually, some of our 12-year-olds are pretty large these days. So we can accept adult clothing. So anything that you have that you're not possibly using that you think a kid could use, we can take it. We can take shoes. Hygiene items are so important. Diapers, as I mentioned, are so important. So there's that. Or you can make, if you're creative, you can make cards. We need 75,000 cards this year, and we're at 20,500, and we need to have 75 by August. There are so many ways you can help. You can collect clothing, then you can come into our Giving Factory and volunteer. You can volunteer with your school, faith-based group, your alumni group, and it's great social activity to be with people who are like-minded. And then finally, of course, we always need funding for those basics that we don't get in the donated product stream. So socks and underwear have to be new, hygiene items have to be new, diapers and school supplies have to be new. So everyone can help. Everyone can help. And I think that's the most exciting thing about Cradles to Crayons is that you don't have to be a millionaire. You don't have to be someone who has got scads of time to give. Only a few minutes can make a difference. Only a few pennies can make a difference. And we're just so grateful for the volunteers who come into our warehouse, the volunteers who support us all over the region, so that we can help. And we plan to help 300,000 kids this year.
That's amazing. Oh, I love it. Well, I just want to thank you for being my guest today. I've so enjoyed our conversation. I know my audience has listened to it and found value in it. I want to invite my listeners to rate and review this episode wherever you listen to this podcast. It helps other people to know about what the art of volunteering is and our vision to restore the fabric of society through volunteering. So I want to thank you for listening today, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the art of volunteering. Have a great day.